Franklin Delano Roosevelt,
do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office
of President of the United States
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution
of the United States.
So help me God.
From NBC News in Washington, the Clinton inaugural. Here are Tom Brokaw and Bryant Gumbel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to one of the most remarkable and enduring moments in history, the peaceful and ordered transformation of power in the most powerful nation in the world. Bryant, we have been witness to so much profound change that is still shaping this world, change that now will be the responsibility of this new generation of American leaders. Bill Clinton and Al Gore, the political offspring of John F. Kennedy, the 40-something leadership of this country, born after World War II, shaped by the 1960s, shaped by Vietnam, and successful because they promised that they would be agents of change. So we are really here today, I think, witness to a profound passage in American history.
Well, it's interesting. You know, what we're going to see today, as you know, is part celebration and part ceremony. The celebration will be self-evident. The ceremony is somewhat less ritualistic than you might otherwise think. It seems our forefathers were uncomfortable with the whole idea of a chief executive or a president. And so what we have is much more evolutionary than revolutionary, which is why they so liberally borrow from the past. 4 years ago, as you and I sat here, it was from George to George.
Right.
Now the historic man of the hour is Thomas Jefferson, who had the first inaugural in this city, and who the last time he took it, he had a vice president named Clinton.
The underpinning of democracy, a little touch of majesty and coronation, and a lot of rock and roll in this one as well.
You would expect so.
And this is an all-Baptist administration, by the way, the Gores and the Clintons, and they began this morning at a Baptist church here in Washington, D.C. You were watching that on the Today Show.
They actually got there a little late, Tom. They were due there at 8 o'clock. He had a national security briefing from National Security Advisor Brent Scowcroft at Blair House, and so was a little late getting underway on over to the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church. But there it was a rather emotional Bill Clinton that grasped his wife's hand in the first row and sang along. There was a moment during the service when we detected a tear running down his left cheek. But as you know so well, he's a man who likes his music and he likes his religion. He had a full helping of both this morning.
He is a man of very strong faith, and when he was in trouble early in the campaign and knew that he would have to count on the black vote, a lot of people believed that the black preachers in the South would turn out to vote for Bill Clinton because they felt that he understood them and he was so much at ease when he came into their churches. Standing by now, I think she's been removed from her position outside of Blair House, is NBC's Andrea Mitchell, who will become the new White House correspondent in the Clinton administration. Where is the president-elect at this moment, Andrea?
He is back in Blair House, Tom. He will be walking across the street to meet with George Bush, Dan Quayle, and friends, leaders of the House and the Senate, for coffee and tea before they go up to the Capitol. We just saw Linda Bloodworth-Thomason and her husband Harry Thomason, who've been producing all of these activities, all of the glitz of the gala last night. The Hollywood touch has certainly been felt here. They've already walked to the North Portico and have arrived here at the White House. So that reception for friends and top officials from Congress has already begun, but Clinton will be coming over with Hillary and Chelsea Clinton sometime from now. We think that he was working on the speech, or at least reviewing the speech with some of his top aides earlier this morning. He said that he was writing it himself. He had advice from a lot of people, including papers that were found posthumously in the papers left behind by the late Reverend Timothy Healy, who was Clinton's mentor at Georgetown University and sadly died a few weeks ago. Will not see his former student being sworn in today.
He was the head of the New York Public Library at the time of his death, Tim Healy, and of course he felt very strongly about the success of his student, Bill Clinton, and so today, in one way or another, we probably will hear some of the words of Tim Healy even after his passing.
As Andrea noted, the next stop for the Clintons is on over at the White House. John Cochran is standing by there to give us an idea of what kind of emotions are running there on Pennsylvania Avenue. John, good morning.
Good morning. Marlon Fitzwater, the president's press secretary, said the president is sad this morning. He, however, did do something that Ronald Reagan did for him. He has left a note on his desk for Bill Clinton. We don't know what's in the note. You know, Reagan left a little caricature of a turkey and said, "Don't let the turkeys get you down." I imagine knowing that George Bush has a sense of humor, he said something like that. The president got his last national security briefing this morning. He transmitted a letter to Congress saying that Saddam Hussein is still a bad citizen, still a threat. He had to do that under a certain federal law requiring him to report on the Iraq situation. He also took a walk around the South Lawn with his dog Ranger, and he went by and said goodbye to the White House operators. If I may be permitted just a personal observation, 32 years ago I was here, and one of the White House communication GIs, a beardless youth here, and Dwight Eisenhower came by to say goodbye, and I got a chance to speak to him, and I remember he said, "Young man, you're in a rougher situation than I because you've got to stay here." But he was very pleased to be out of here. I don't think George Bush is glad to be out of here. He really liked being president.
All right, John, and perhaps just one final tribute to George Bush. We understand that when Brent Scowcroft had finished briefing Bill Clinton this morning, he walked down the stairs and somebody said, "General Scowcroft, how's the world today?" And he said, "Considerably safer."
And George Bush and Barbara Bush, of course, are always noted for their gracious manners, and I'm sure that there won't be any awkwardness once the Clintons arrive there. They are due there in about 10 minutes, if they stay on time. We'll be watching the Clinton schedule because there is something known as Clinton time. He often runs behind, and we'll be back with more from Washington, D.C. on this inaugural day right after this.
The presidential inaugural ceremonies are being sponsored in part by Cotton Incorporated. Cotton, the fabric of our lives. By new Arm & Hammer Cat Litter Deodorizer. It'll change the way you feel about changing the litter. By Kellogg's, the best to you each morning. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Comfort in a four-wheel drive. Amazing.
I got a big crew and I need a lot of space.
It makes me feel tall.
It's tough but refined, kind of like me.
It's got it all.
Why do more people find themselves in a Ford Explorer than any other vehicle in its class? For as many reasons as there are Explorers.
Finders keepers.
Find yourself in an Explorer.
Have you driven a Ford lately?
Hello, would you care to try some Kellogg's
Crispix Mix? Are you kidding? I love this stuff. Hey, Sally, they're giving away Kellogg's Crispix Mix.
Crispix Mix? Where?
The irresistible taste of Kellogg's Crispix Mix, with its savory mix of flavors and tempting crunchiness.
Any more Crispix Mix? Well, I suppose we could make another batch.
It's the snack that gets eaten and eaten. So if you want to have a get-together the Kellogg's Crispix Mix.
Great party.
Thank you.
Getting together for the big game this weekend? Then get together the Kellogg's Crispix Mix.
If your cat can do this, you don't have to face changing the litter. For the rest of us, there's new Arm & Hammer Cat Litter Deodorizer. Pour it in first, then add any litter. It has genuine Arm & Hammer baking soda to absorb odor, and it has a moisture-activated fragrance that keeps the litter so fresh you won't hate changing it. So unless your cat can do this, get new Arm & Hammer Cat Litter Deodorizer. It'll change the way you feel about changing the litter.
Wow, that's a lot of shrimp.
At Red Lobster, for a limited time, enjoy 30 shrimp for just $9.99.
What sounds good to you folks tonight? 30 shrimp, please. Great choice.
With lemon pepper shrimp, succulent scampi, delicious grilled shrimp, and our famous fried shrimp. That's 4 different kinds. 30 shrimp on one plate, just $9.99, at only one place.
Only at Red Lobster.
And kids get shrimp too. A complete meal, just $1.99.
Imagine that you're the President of the United States. You've taken the oath of office. You're delivering the inaugural address to a vast television audience. But this is the scene directly before you. That should lift you or give you some pause, I suppose, depending on your point of view. Looking out across the majesty of Washington, knowing that you inherit a world that is going through an international recession, profound political and economic changes here at home, and a kind of simmering war in the Persian Gulf. NBC's John Chancellor will be with us all morning as well. He is the commentator of record, of course, for NBC, and he has been witness to this since, what, the first or the second Lincoln inaugural, John?
No, it was, in fact, if you really want to know, it was the second Eisenhower inaugural in 1956 when I sat out there and froze various parts of my body. I remember that quite vividly. I've been wondering, Tom, how do you describe this new president in ideological terms. Is Bill Clinton a reaction to 12 years of Reagan and Bush? I don't really think so. I think Clinton is an accomplished politician, but he's not a traditional liberal. He did beat a liberal in the primaries last year, Jerry Brown, a very traditional liberal who mounted a serious challenge in a few primaries against Clinton. Clinton has shown that he's a liberal on social issues. He'll be liberal on abortion. He'll be liberal on things like gay and lesbian rights, but he'll be less liberal on social programs. And a good example of that are the things he said about reforming welfare. And I don't know what he's going to be, and I'm not sure he knows whether he's going to be liberal, moderate, or conservative on fiscal policy, on taxes and the deficits. You know, the last liberal we had in the White House here left 24 years ago. That was Lyndon Johnson. Jimmy Carter was much more of a moderate, pragmatist, centrist Democrat, and there are indications that Bill Clinton may be more like Carter than he was like Lyndon Johnson. Tom?
Thank you, John. And Bryant, we've just gotten word Bill Clinton has done his homework right up to the last moment. He just finished his speech, and he'll be delivering that in about 2 hours from now. So we're all happy and relieved that he finished before he got up there and didn't have to read from notes.
Well, as you know, Tom, he's a great tinkerer.
Right.
More often than not, unfortunately, his tinkering means extending it just a little bit. But we understand that he has been cautioned over and over again, even with people imploring Hillary to lean on him to keep it to time.
Be brief.
Be brief. You got that right. Let's go on over to the Capitol Rotunda, where Lisa Myers is standing by this morning with a special guest. Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning, Bryant. As you know, one of the big stories this year is the large number of new members in Congress, many of them women and minorities. With me today is one of the 13 new senators this year, a woman many think will emerge as one of the stars of her class, Senator Patty Murray of Washington State. Welcome.
Well, it's great to be here today.
One of the words on everyone's lips around here is change. How do you expect that this new Congress will be different?
I think we're going to see a Congress and an administration who understands what America is going through today, that we have single-parent families, two-parent working families, that we care about the future, whether it's our education system, our healthcare system, our jobs, economy. You're going to see a Congress who's going to get down and get to work. We're going to celebrate today, but tomorrow we are ready to go.
Well, what are some of the initiatives that you and other new members will be pushing that might not otherwise be high on the agenda?
Simple things like family leave that merely send the message to our nation that we're going to finally care about real people again. And the larger issue of dealing with the tremendous budget deficit that's in front of us, and at the same time saying we've got to put people back to work. Big challenges, but we know we can do it if we put our minds to it.
Just about all the new members have spoken passionately about the need to reduce the deficit. But then comes the tough issue, which is how do you do it? Are you prepared to cast the tough votes to increase taxes or to cut entitlements like Medicare and Social Security?
I think all of us come to the job this year understanding that the decisions are not going to be easy, but we also know that as long as we work together and we all give our fair share, we can make it happen.
Thank you very much, Senator Patty Murray of Washington. Bryant?
All right, Lisa, thanks so very much. You know, Tom, it's interesting. Earlier this morning, I had a chance to talk with James Carville, one of the chief architects of the Bill Clinton victory, and I asked him if he could give Bill Clinton one word of advice to watch out for the pothole on that smooth road to a great presidency. What would he say? He said just that the people were serious about change. It wasn't just a catchword. It wasn't just a handle that could make things work, and we're not talking about tinkering around the edges. They're serious about change.
And there's an enormous amount of goodwill out there for Bill Clinton, even with the difficulty that he had in the transition. I think about 70% of the people in the country approve of how he's been conducting themselves, and they do have high expectations. But a former deputy press secretary in the Nixon administration, Gerald Warren, said they have to remember when they walk in the White House, the bookcases are empty, and there's no user's manual. They'll have to figure it out for themselves. We'll be back right after this.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
With trusting eyes, the children show, minds open, hearts true, our spirits grow. The touch, the feel, fabric of our lives, the touch, the feel of cotton, the fabric eyes.
They go by names like Chapel Lane, California Highway 1, and the Great White Way. Roads that start out in small towns like Pottersville and lead you to bigger towns like Pumpkin Corners. There are over 4 million miles of roads in Alamo territory all across America. And every day, with every car nationwide, only Alamo gives you all those miles for free through a country we call America, to the place we call home.
How can I ever forget one of my special customers, little Michael? Every week he'd come in, and every time he'd say, his eyes shining,
"Store reason, please, Mrs. Lang."
One of those reasons I had to give him immediately. The others I put in a bag for him. Now there is Stork Chocolate Reason, a long-lasting, chewy chocolate caramel covered with rich chocolate, just right for Michael.
Stork Chocolate Reason, please, Mrs. Lang.
And Michael still eats the first one immediately. Stork Chocolate Reason, the everlasting chocolate chew.
My glasses are so heavy. Can Lens Crafters help?
You need Lens Crafters exclusive featherweights. Lighter, slimmer.
They're so light and so comfortable. I hardly know I've got them on.
Lens Crafters, better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
We're inside 2 hours and counting towards the inauguration of Bill Clinton as this nation's 42nd president. You're looking at a live shot just outside Blair House where the Clintons are inside gathering their party. Shortly they are expected to come out with the Gores, the Thomasons, and Ron and Alma Brown, then to make their way on over to the White House for some brief words with the Bushes, and then we have things on fast forward moving towards a noon swearing in.
Bill Clinton will be drinking decaffeinated coffee because that's one of his allergies. We'll be hearing a lot more about that because he does, gets the raspy throat and has a lot of reaction. He does not, however, have an allergic reaction to Big Macs, to peanut butter and banana sandwiches, to donuts, to burgers of almost any kind, we're told, and a wide variety of snack foods.
Isn't that the truth? He has been up and about for some time now. He spent a good part of this morning over at the Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church, where Bob Hager was on duty outside for a time, but Bob is out and about throughout Washington, D.C., seeing some other parts of the city this morning, and he's got a report right now. Bob, where are you?
Right, we're on the 5200 block of Georgia Avenue in Northwest Washington. It's an area that's sometimes forgotten by the politicians.
I'm good, how are you?
It's a black area of Washington, a black business corridor. Let me show you a little of it. It's important because Bill Clinton came here just after he was elected. It was the 18th of November. It was his first time back in Washington, and he chose to come here among his other official visits around town. It's an area, as I say, of small businesses. Most of these businesses have been broken into at one point or another. They keep their doors locked. Somebody was just trying to get into this shoe repair place, and the door was locked, and they had to knock at the door to get in there. So that's how careful people are around here about crime. Also, there's a problem of jobs. There are a lot of things on people's minds. And we have with us Mrs. Andre Gandhi, who heads a program here in the neighborhood and around the city to revitalize small businesses. First of all, what does it mean to people when Bill Clinton came here in this neighborhood, do you think?
President Clinton's visit to Georgia Avenue, to have him walk along this corridor and talk to the merchants individually, meant a great deal. It was absolutely the best shot in the arm that they could have had. We believe that this corridor, Georgia Avenue, since it is the longest commercial corridor in Washington, can serve as a model and, in fact, a demonstration for the kinds of programs and commitments that he appears to be prepared to make.
Talking about programs and commitments, he's talked about trying to do something about turning around the crime problem, trying to help small business, I believe, through loosening up investments with the Small Business Administration. Do you really believe those promises? Do you think that something is going to change, that it'll be easier for people like you?
Indeed so. I believe that he's been able to give us a great deal of hope and that he's going to deliver. One of the things that we look forward to, Bob, is to having him know that there's a need for the Community Development Bank that he's talked about, and we want to be able to provide the kinds of new beginnings and fresh commitment to provide the dollars that are going to make some things happen here.
Is it mostly money? Is that mostly what it's about?
Well, money is a part of it, but throwing money into this neighborhood or any urban neighborhood across the country by itself is simply not going to do it. What we need to do is to look at forging the kind of relationships, lasting relationships, that will make a big difference. We're hoping that he will also create a holistic approach, which means that we've got to talk about affordable housing needs as well as commercial needs in urban neighborhoods throughout the country.
Mrs. Gandhi, thanks very much for being with us today.
You're very welcome.
And we'll send it back to you.
All right, Bob Hager, thank you very much. It's significant that Bob is there. As much as anyone, Bill Clinton appreciates the value of a good symbol. He strikes one back to Ronald Reagan in that regard. We're mindful of shortly after the election when he came to Washington as the president-elect. After meeting with George Bush at the White House, he did not want the front page picture to be him sitting there with a defeated president. And so he was down on Georgia Avenue there meeting the people.
I think that there's going to be a tricky piece of business for this new president because he's very cognizant of the fact that you've got to have the symbolism of the majesty of the office and the power of the presidency. He thinks that Ronald Reagan did an extraordinarily good job of restoring all of that, but at the same time he wants to be in touch with the rest of America in a way that presidents have not been for some time. We'll see him out and around the country a good deal more, not just on Georgia Avenue in Washington, D.C., and then that comes into conflict with what the Secret Service wants, because security is exceptionally tight around a president these days. We sat in traffic here last night for a half an hour waiting for the return of the Clintons from the gala, and they just sealed off the center of Washington, D.C. for a long, long time just to let the motorcade pass. So
he was operating on Clinton Standard Time again?
Clinton Standard Time again, that's right.
Which has him moving around, and which also has him, what, a little bit behind schedule already. The schedule had called for him to emerge from Blair House at 10:15 and make his way on through. He's now, I understand, about
5 minutes.
5 minutes behind schedule, which still isn't that bad. He's expected to arrive at the White House at somewhere close to 10:20.
Well, I think it's always fun to kind of conjecture on what's going on over at the White House right now. I mean, maybe they called over to Blair House and said, oh, George fouled up the first pot of coffee. We've got to get the filter back in and do a better job, and he's grinding the beans. Now, if you could just take a beat or two, we'll be ready for you when you get there.
I would imagine of all the things that take place on this day, that may have the most strained moments in it, when the outgoing chief executive has to greet the incoming first family, and they sit there and make small talk and act cordial.
I think it'll be helped by the fact that both Barbara Bush and Hillary Clinton got along so well during Hillary Clinton's tour. And before he began to run for office, Bill Clinton said to me, you know, I genuinely like George Bush. We've talked about education reform and other things, so I think that there will be a personal rapport that won't be strained by the political difficulties of the moment. Brian, we're going to go to Margaret Larson now, who is on Pennsylvania Avenue, where the crowds, even we can see, are beginning to assemble in considerable numbers for the parade that's coming up later this morning. Margaret?
Tom, that's correct. There have been people here since about 6:30 this morning trying to get a good seat for the parade. The crowds are thickening up now, not only for the parade, but for the motorcade, bringing the president and president-elect to the Capitol for the swearing-in ceremony. As you can probably see, some of the personnel from the U.S. Navy are lining the street now in preparation for that motorcade, which should be coming down in just a few minutes. Mr. Bush and Mr. Clinton will be in the first car to pass. They will be followed by their wives, and then a car carrying the Quayles, and then the Gores, and the children, and also the Thomasons following down to the swearing-in ceremony. We are waiting, of course, for the big event this afternoon along this route, and that is the parade. Some 25,000 people are in Washington to see all of the activities, take part in the festivities. About 10,000 people involved in this parade, a huge affair that brings together organizations and groups from every U.S. state and territory. It is, as we mentioned earlier, a very diverse parade that will feature for the first time a group from gay and lesbian organizations, a group of Native Americans. They will be accompanying the senator from Colorado, the first Native American to be elected. And we'll be seeing also some military color guards, military representatives, as always. We will be seeing, in addition to that, some entertainment before the parade that features some fairly lighthearted fare, such as the young and old Elvis impersonators who are here trying to give us a bit of a preview of what we might expect during the Clinton years, which are expected to be years in which entertainment and fun will be seen in the White House entertainment. Tom?
Very much, Margaret Larson. John Chancellor is still at his post over there in the commentator circle. John, I know that you've talked to a lot of people around Bill Clinton. One of their concerns about what happens when he gets to the Oval Office is that he likes to do everything for himself. If he gets 10 people in a room and 8 of them sign off on a project, he spends another day trying to get the other 2 to go along with him, and they think that could be a problem as he begins to govern.
Well, the way that they explain it to me is that it isn't that he can't make up his mind, he wants to be the last to make up his mind. He wants to get every piece of evidence in so he doesn't make a mistake, and even some of the people who are close to him kind of shake their head when he does that. My guess and our hope should be that this new president learns not to delay, waiting for that last bit of information before he decides, and I wonder if that hasn't had something to do with the slowness of the sub-cabinet appointments that we've seen.
Yeah, I think as well, John, that they learned during the transition that there were so many decisions to make, but that will increase by 100-fold once they get into the White House itself. Al Haig once said to me, you know, what people don't fully appreciate is when you get there, everything comes to where you're sitting and working. And there he is, President-elect of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton. He's hurrying everyone along. He's in front of them.
Looks like he has donned the top coat, something he did not have earlier when he made his way to services this morning.
I think he's hurrying Chelsea along, his 13-year-old daughter.
Him on over to the White House will be Harry and Linda Bloodworth-Thomason, the co-producers of the inaugural festivities, and also Ron and Alma Brown, he the outgoing chair of the DNC and the incoming Secretary of Commerce.
For those of you who are not exactly familiar with Blair House, it's just a very short drive. It's less than a full city block from there to the west wing of the White House. They'll be making that entrance. But for security reasons and also for ceremonial reasons, they'll be arriving by limousine.
We understand that it is actually quite unusual for the president-elect to have the company that he does going over there to what is normally a very private session, but it is not without precedent since Ron Brown is was the DNC chair rather, when Bill Clinton managed his victory in November.
That's a new presidential Cadillac, by the way. $250,000, armor-plated. Enormous amount of security arrangements, obviously.
What did I read when he was told about it? He asked to see a picture of it. Guess it met with his approval. John Cochran is still on the White House grounds. John, I don't want to put you on the spot. What kind of a view have you got?
Well, I'm just about to wave to him, and I don't know if he'll wave back. No, he's turning the other way, talking apparently to Chelsea again. The Bushes, as you said, will be very gracious to these people. I think the Bushes do like the Clintons. There is no personal hard feeling there, but I'll tell you there's some hard feeling between the stabs. The Bush people really don't like the Clinton people that much. Privately, they're saying some rather unkind things about them, but I suppose that's to be expected. It was a hard-fought campaign, but certainly between the primary contestants here, I think there are good feelings.
John, what about the people who have been fired? I mean, is Bill Clinton going to inherit an Baltimore Orioles baseball park? Ann almost died and then had a lasting effect on the Gore family, Ron Brown and Alma Brown.
It's tough for us to make out the conversation, but if there are strange feelings, they certainly are not evident. George and Barbara Bush being extremely gracious and what we could hear extremely friendly towards those in the Clinton party. And Millie came in for a good share of presidential attention, too, we might add.
Welcome, welcome, the president said. Welcome to your new house. I wish him all the best in the duties that lie before him. You could hardly ask for a more gracious transition than the beginning of the transition, at least than that.
At least the beginning of it. Now they will stay inside and have coffee and brief refreshments, and then after that, as we said, it's on fast forward. They will leave the White House and make their way towards the Capitol.
They will indeed, and we'll be watching it all with you here on NBC, and we'll be back after this station break.
NBC News coverage of the Clinton inaugural will continue.
It's an all-new mystery. A boss turns up missing. Did his employee murder for money and burn the evidence? Plus, help catch the killer of a young girl. Unsolved Mysteries, NBC tonight.
NBC's your ticket to the inaugural ball. Join Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric in our nation's capital for an NBC News special tonight on NBC.
On Wednesday, January 20th, Bill Clinton will be sworn in as president. Can he make St. Louis a better place? Can he help St. Louis's struggling economy? Will there be health care for everyone? And what about the tough issues that divide our city? issues like abortion and the environment. Karen Foss examines how the Clinton presidency could affect St. Louis and if it will change the way we live our lives. The President's Plan, a cover story series tonight on News Channel 5 at 10.
When your bathroom scale gains more weight than you, gets harder to read than the fine print on your mortgage, and doesn't even offer emotional support, it's time to get a Health-O-Meter professional. It gives you physician scale quality for a lifetime of accuracy and durability. The Health-O-Meter Professional. Other scales just don't measure up. Right now, get up to $10 worth of SlimFast coupons and selected Health-O-Meter scales.
Call the Volunteer 5 hotline today, 969-VOL-5.
NBC News coverage of the Clinton inaugural continues.
We're back, and we are at a moment in history here, and we will be in about 90 minutes when George Bush goes out of office. That means that we'll have 5 living former presidents of the United States at this time: Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, and George Bush, about to be an ex-president. That's the first time that's happened since 1861. One of the former presidents who is here today is Jimmy Carter. In fact, he's the only one who's attended these ceremonies. All the rest were invited. They declined to accept the invitation of the Clintons. And Jimmy Carter has had a very productive life since leaving the White House. We all know about that. But in a recent interview with NBC's Ken Lee Jones, he talked about his last days in the Oval Office, his thoughts.
Well, I never had been in the Oval Office before, but after I was elected president, Gerald Ford was nice enough to invite me up just to look at the Oval Office. But it was a brief visit, just a courtesy call. The sobering and emotional part was when we finally went into the White House to be there for 4 years. And went from one room to another and saw where Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln and Harry Truman and Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt and others had served. Saw the furniture that they used and the beds on which they slept. And realized the overwhelming responsibility that I had from a personal point of view, and the history that we would be involved in making.
What about when you greeted Mr. and Mrs. Reagan at the White House? I mean, there must have been a different feeling, obviously, going out as a loser rather than the winner.
Well, this was Tuesday morning, and since Saturday night, I had not at all been to bed. I had been trying to negotiate the release of the hostages before I left office. Neither President Reagan nor any of his senior cabinet officers, defense or state, would even receive a briefing about the hostage crisis. They had wanted to have nothing to do with it at all.
On the ride to the Capitol from the White House, did you and Mr. Reagan discuss that issue at all?
No. Tip O'Neill was in the car with us, and it was mostly just a kind of a casual bantering back and forth about the crowds and the different people we saw along the way and the different flags flying. And I think Tip and President Reagan were telling Irish jokes. So it was a very informal trip from the White House to the Capitol.
Jimmy Carter, one of those who has conducted himself in exemplary fashion since leaving office, and in the process elevated the image that was considerably down when he left the White House, Tom.
I think that even those who were close to him say this was a man who was not quite prepared for the job that he assumed, and then he had a very difficult time, both economically and with the hostages in Iran. But he's gone off, and as you say, he's conducted himself in the most exemplary fashion, not only continuing his interest in international affairs, especially in the Middle East and the disputes in Africa, but as a kind of Christian missionary, I suppose, and for humanitarian reasons, Habitat for Humanity, and the many things that he does in this country. And he's used his library for a lot of very productive conferences about the presidency and about the state of the world.
Very difficult for any man to come down from the mountaintop and know what you do with the rest of your life. John Chancellor has some thoughts on how some others have handled it, or some suggestions they've had.
Well, the question of what to do with former presidents has been a vexing one in the United States for a long time. There was an editor of the Louisville Courier-Journal at one time when there were 5 of these fellows around with not much to do, and he worried that some of them might get back in politics and be disruptive, and so he said, in jest, maybe we just ought to take them out and shoot them. That's a joke. Don't write in, please. But and then Grover Cleveland, another former president, came along and said later he thought that was a pretty good idea. It's worthy of attention, he said, taking them out and shooting them. Harry Truman, himself a former president at that time, had an idea that made a little more sense. He wanted them to be appointed members of the U.S. Senate with no vote. And wiser heads over here on the Hill said, no, they didn't think that was a very good idea. So they're still all out there, and now we've got 5 of them again.
For the record, lest everybody go scurrying to their history books after Tom said that hasn't happened, 5 former presidents since 1861 witnessed to an inauguration. When Lincoln was inaugurated in 61, the 5 living former presidents were Martin Van Buren, Franklin Pierce, Millard Fillmore, John Tyler, and James Buchanan. Not exactly a memorable bunch.
And we have so loaded up our computer, we can tell you that there are now 7 former First Ladies who are living as well.
Don't ask me.
Jackie Kennedy and Lady Bird Johnson, of course.
Adding to the 5.
Right. Their husbands are deceased, but they continue on, and we'll now have 7 altogether. We want to show you the Capitol because people are beginning to assemble there. Justice Rehnquist, we suspect, is somewhere in the bowels of the Capitol preparing to offer the oath of the President to William Jefferson Clinton at high noon today. You're looking down Pennsylvania Avenue. This is the scene that Bill Clinton will look out upon, and we expect an enormous crowd. Between 300,000 and 500,000 were here the other night at the Lincoln Memorial for that rock and roll concert, and we can expect close to that many for this presidential inauguration, because this represents a true change in power. It's been 12 years since the Democrats have assumed the presidency, and there are a whole lot of Democrats across the country who come to be witness to this. Saw a family last night from Alabama, 5 children, mother and dad, very proud, and they were just taking in all the sights, going everywhere that they could, having their pictures taken with everybody else. The Arkansas legislators had a whole table at a restaurant here. South Dakota Democrats filled up a table. That's about the entire party in South Dakota. So there are a lot of people who've come from across the country to be witness to this moment. NBC's Tim Russert is in the Capitol area, and Tim, there's been a lot of speculation about the role of Hillary Clinton, and we do think that it will be considerable, don't we?
Absolutely, Tom. I spoke to Clinton aides as late as last night. They describe it as all pervasive. Many Clinton aides say that Hillary Clinton was elected too. Let me give you 2 examples. Just yesterday, the future First Lady was telling the future President, discipline, Bill, the D word. You must keep this speech short. Discipline, discipline. In a week, you can give your State of the Union message. Make this your executive summary. One other example, Tom. Last Sunday, we saw pictures of Colin Powell, the Chairman of Joint Chief of Staff, Les Aspin, new Secretary of Defense, going into the Blair House to brief Bill Clinton on the situation in Iraq. There was actual discussion within the Clinton ranks whether Hillary should sit in on that military briefing. They decided she should not. People at the Pentagon tell me she does not have top security clearance, and she will not be allowed into future security briefings as well.
Thank you very much, Tim Russert. We'll be coming back to you throughout the course of the day. Tim, of course, is our Washington Bureau Chief, resident political analyst, and moderator of Meet the Press, and chief booster of the Buffalo Bills in the nation's capital.
Yeah, he's been talking a lot now. He wasn't yelling a lot at halftime when the playoffs began, but he's happy now. Right.
Bryant, we're going to be back with continuing coverage of this inauguration of Bill Clinton and Al Gore, now in the White House, meeting with George and Barbara Bush. We'll continue right after this.
The presidential inaugural ceremonies are being sponsored in part by Pringles. So fresh. Once you pop, you can't stop. And by Ford and your Ford dealer. Have you driven a Ford lately?
Introducing Ford Taurus SHO and the craving. If you've had a craving for a truly sophisticated performance sedan, may we suggest our 24-valve, 220 horsepower Taurus SHO, now available with automatic transmission. Think of it as caviar for the power hungry.
This is light.
Spring's light. Those are great.
Wow! These are light?
Give me more!
Wait. Let's put Pringles Light up against these bag chips. There's 25% less fat in Pringles than in these.
You're talking my language.
And they're a lot less greasy. A lot less.
That's great.
Fantastic. These are great.
Once you pop, you can't stop. But I don't have to.
folks look like experienced travelers.
Well, we are staying at a Clarion hotel.
Did you know if you pay for your room with the American Express card, you can save 30%?
Sure, for business, for pleasure.
So, happy with your room?
Yeah, they told us if they couldn't make us happy, that first night's on them.
Ooh, sounds like a good deal.
Oh, and another thing.
At Clarion, they don't throw your luggage around. Tea?
Thank you. Clarion Hotels and the American Express card. For reservations, call 1-800-4CHOICE.
If you're wondering where we are, that's it. This is our little homespun booth here atop the Labor Department on Constitution Avenue, just across from the Capitol, as you can see in the background there. We do have a remarkable view.
Lighting director's nightmare.
Yeah, it is, because the sun is coming up from the east, obviously, and it's pouring in on us, keeping us warm, and our comfort is not of concern to all of you today. We know that. Our families are a little bit concerned about, just a trifle. We were talking just a few moments ago, talking about family relationships, about the role of Hillary Clinton in this White House. There was a great deal of talk about a co-presidency when Bill Clinton selected one of his contemporaries, Al Gore, the senator from Tennessee, as a vice president. A lot of speculation in recent days about Gore moving down, if you will, Hillary Clinton moving up when it comes to making decisions. Well, over the weekend, I asked Gore about his place in the Clinton advice team.
Well, you saw a very different relationship during the campaign than you have ever seen in the past. We're alike in our outlook, in our dreams for the country, in our backgrounds in many ways. We're both sons of the New South, and we have fought for the same changes within the country and within the Democratic Party. And we have found, as our friendship has grown, that we really enjoy working together. We each bring a slightly different perspective. We've each concentrated on different aspects of the challenge that lies before our country now. And it's been fun, and it has worked well, and it's going to continue that way.
President-elect Clinton has made it very clear that the one person he'd like to have in a room during a major crisis would be Hillary Clinton. Do you feel slightly left out by the fact that he puts you in third place and Hillary Clinton kind of in second place in the chain of command there?
Well, no, of course not. And I think that one of the things that is new with this generational change that you see in this inaugural is a different kind of dialogue between husbands and wives about the kinds of issues that presidents have to deal with. And Hillary Clinton is a force for good. She has excellent advice. And if people knew the full range and quality of the advice she brings to the table, they'd be asking, why doesn't he rely on her more?
Are you going to be able to escape some of the cliches of the vice presidency in the past, always being the man who represents the United States at foreign funerals, for example?
Until I go to my first funeral.
Al Gore is a man with a wide range of interest and expertise in this city, but he also knows that he is the Vice President of the United States, and Bryant, it was ever thus, they're always going to be number two.
Isn't that the truth? Al Gore and his family are still in the Blue Room, the formal parlor at the White House, still having coffee and Danish with George and Barbara Bush. We are waiting for them to emerge from the White House and start to make their way over to the Capitol, a distance of only 1.5 miles or so. While we wait them, let's go to Andrew Mitchell, who's over by the White House. And Andrew wants to talk about the new administration. We note that just about 2 hours from now, Bill Clinton will be signing those documents officially nominating his cabinet. What are your thoughts on that end, Andrew?
Well, as you know, they're going to rush through confirmation votes today on Secretary of State-designate Warren Christopher and Defense Secretary-designate Les Aspin to bring them officially into office, and a swearing-in will be held. Earlier, as you know, also, Brent Scowcroft briefed Bill Clinton for about an hour over at the Blair House, and we're now told that one of the pieces of that briefing was to a rather sobering thought, brief him on how to use the nuclear codes. So he was given a full briefing on the White House communication system, the nuclear codes, and what he would have to do in case of an emergency. This in addition to bringing him up to date on Iraq and other points around the world. Just about a half hour ago, Tony Lake, the new National Security Advisor, arrived with his staff, walked from the northwest gate of the White House and went into the West Wing to assume his new office. And I asked him how things were, and he said everything is very quiet. And just another thought about Hillary Clinton as this administration takes over, to add to what Tom was just discussing with Vice President-elect Al Gore. I talked to a cabinet secretary this week, and we were discussing domestic policy, and I was asking about Carol Rasko, who's going to be domestic policy advisor. She's an Arkansas state official. And he said very matter-of-factly, well, the reason she was chosen is because she will report to Hillary, because Hillary will be running domestic policy. And this was a very matter-of-fact statement. It was a given from this member of the cabinet.
All right. Andrew Mitchell over at the White House. Thanks, Andrew. We'll be checking back with you. We've still a lot more ahead on this inauguration morning. We'll come back and try to pick up the first family, the new first family, as they leave the White House and head for the formal proceedings over at the Capitol. We'll get to that when we come back right after this.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
So you really like that, huh?
Oh, yeah. It's great.
Things you never heard about a bran cereal before.
It's bran.
It's what?
Bran.
No, it isn't. Isn't bran mushy? These flakes are crunchy.
Kellogg's Frosted Bran is different. It's lightly frosted and very crunchy, even in milk.
Hey, Mom, the cereal you got? That's really good.
Kellogg's Frosted Bran. It sure doesn't sound like bran.
So you like them.
I love them.
When we gave the Escort of the 90s more power, better handling, more room, and a sleeker look, we received a special recognition. More repeat buyers than any small car in America. Ford Escort.
Hi.
Hi.
Was it something I said?
Just a business trip. I came over last night. I had company.
You mean my brother? He just loves my coffee.
Your brother.
Savor the sophisticated taste of Taster's Choice.
Hi.
Don't tell me you forgot to pack your Taster's Choice.
Listen, I'm going to be in Paris.
How romantic.
Oh, it can be.
Fido, Fido. Oh. Fetch Fido.
Is your best friend trying to tell you something? Yes, Dentine now has more breath freshening flavor. So brush your breath clean with great tasting new Dentine.
This is the plan for the B-2 bomber. This is the structure of DNA. This is a long-distance calling plan. What do they all have in common? You can't understand any one of them. Fortunately, Sprint can decipher long distance for you. With priority service, they'll review your account and let you know if you're on the right plan. It's that easy. And this is how you call Sprint.
It's a festive day here in Washington, D.C., of course, but in the Persian Gulf, American forces do remain on alert, even though Saddam Hussein has declared a unilateral ceasefire, hoping to extend an olive branch to Bill Clinton. Nonetheless, President George Bush has extended the term of Defense Secretary Dick Cheney until 4 o'clock this afternoon so that we can have continuity of command at the very top in case something happens. The coffee now is coming to an end, just about 5 minutes past schedule, maybe a little more than that. That's President George Bush that you just saw a moment ago. They'll begin to emerge from the White House, and then they will ride together to Capitol Hill. And as Brian has used the phrase so aptly this morning, we go on fast forward. Terry Thomason and Linda Bloodworth Thomason.
Co-producers of the event.
Mac McClarty. You'll be seeing a lot of him, the man in the camel hair coat. He's the new White House Chief of Staff, one of Bill Clinton's oldest and closest friends. They met in kindergarten. You know, Brian, Arkansas has been a remarkable pool of considerable political talent. When you think back over the years, Brooks Hayes, the congressman, Senator William Fulbright, Dale Bumpers and David Pryor, two highly regarded senators now. Wilbur Mills, who was the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee for so many years and a powerful force in Capitol Hill. All of these people came from Arkansas, and now the first president from that state, Bill Clinton, who was a 5-term governor of Arkansas. And I think that what happens in a state like Arkansas is that you get 1 or 2 people and they become role models and they inspire generation after generation. Bill Fulbright, of course, was a great mentor to a lot of young people who came out of that state.
But he is not taking a page from the Jimmy Carter book. He is not bringing his state and his people en masse into Washington and turning his back on the establishment. That, of course, was the basis for much of the difficulty that Carter experienced during his 4 years in the White House and the difficulties he had dealing with Congress. Bill Clinton has been wise to keep the confidence of some of those who, with whom he has had long relationships, but to depend on the professionals and, in many cases, the Washington insiders to do business.
People forget that the Speaker of the House was a Democrat when Jimmy Carter was here, Thomas P. Tip O'Neill. No more partisan Democrat than Tip O'Neill, but relations were so bad that he referred to Hamilton Jordan as Hamilton Jerkin, who was the White House Chief of Staff. That was not an auspicious beginning for the Carter White House, and it did, of course, mean that they were going to have trouble on the Hill.
Tip will have a seat on the podium today, along with Jim Wright. Will also be there. Got a chance to see Tip O'Neill yesterday afternoon. He's had some health problems, as I think everyone knows by now. His weight is down considerably, but he says he's feeling pretty good right now.
No, he looked in fine form. He plays a lot of golf, a sport that you care a lot about, and he has an unusual attitude. He said, hit till you're happy. So, I mean, it's not just one mulligan off the tee. You just hit until you're happy.
Problem is, every shot makes somebody happy.
All right, John Chancellor, as we are looking at the White House awaiting the departure of Bill Clinton, what's your best guess about what he'll ask for in his inaugural address? Will he use the John F. Kennedy theme of sacrifice and commitment to country?
I think he will be more general than, or he'll be as general as most of them are when they make these the speeches up here. I think he will save for the State of the Union address the specifics on what he wants to do, because I think they really haven't quite made up their mind on some of these big things. He can paint with a broad brush things like, we need better health care in this country. We need to do something about the deficit. Those are 2 big bell ringers that he probably will mention. But if he's going to be specific about it, I doubt it today that he will get into great specificity. He's also got the problem of 20 minutes. This man is prolix. And we can all remember, Tom, I think I was sitting with you when in 1988 he made that speech for Dukakis, and it went on and on and on and on and on, and then Governor Clinton said, and in conclusion, and everybody in the hall clapped and carried on, and then he went even longer than that, you remember, last summer. So that I think he's got to keep it pretty spare today and hit the high points and not get into a laundry list of things that he wants.
And apparently he's not going to do that, John. We've just gotten advance word that the speech is only 5 pages long. The Clinton transition team is claiming it is the 3rd shortest inaugural speech in history. The very shortest was Washington's first. It was just 135 words altogether. So he took the advice to the extreme. They said, be brief, discipline, as Tim Russert reported from Hillary Clinton. And now we have just a 5-page speech, and we'll see whether it's a poem about what he has in mind for the country.
Well,
is that single-spaced, Tom?
The problem is he plays the game of high expectations, but in truth, as John noted, it is instead to lay out a very broad picture, and then inevitably everyone is prone to compare his speech to those that have gone before, and I guess the one thing on which everyone agrees is that Abraham Lincoln's second in 1865 was the one that is the standard. I think it was 465 words, and I saw where one commentator said comparing this one to any of the others is like comparing a Rembrandt to paint by the numbers.
That's right. It's just on 2 panels over at the Lincoln Memorial. I was over there the other day to read it again, and you cannot read it often enough, nor are you ever failed to be moved by those words at the end of the Civil War. Bill Clinton, in looking at past inaugural addresses, was struck by Richard Nixon's first speech. Ronald Reagan's speech when he came before this land with a new spirit, a new ideology, if you will, has gotten good notices in recent years. But no phrases have been sticking out like John F. Kennedy's ask not, or FDR's we have nothing to fear but fear itself. In the latest edition of Bartlett's, Lincoln is tops with 7, Jefferson, Franklin Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy had 5, most of these from inaugural speeches. Nixon did have 1 in the last edition, but it was dropped this time. Carter, Reagan, and Bush, none. Bush, 4 years ago, said kinder, gentler. but a lot of people feel that he failed to live up to that.
It's been slow times on oratory. You know, this morning I had a chance to visit with a gentleman, Philip Brooks, who's a inaugural historian, inaugural archives historian, I should note. And I was talking with him, and I said the Clinton people have done nothing to discourage comparisons with JFK and his inauguration. Do you see the similarities? And while he acknowledged some, I was surprised. He said this one reminds him most, in a historical sense, of FDR's in 31. He said because of the tenor of the times and the economic tone.
It is that same kind of change, I think. Tim Russett's down there on the Capitol area right now. Tim?
Tom, on the speech, one point I should make is that Bill Clinton insisted that he write this speech himself. Unlike the convention speech, which had a lot of different people contributing words, he said, I'll take your ideas, I'll take your thoughts, but these are going to be my words. He was very taken by a strip to Monticello, where Thomas Jefferson put his own pen to pad, and today, whether it's good or bad, the words you will hear will be Bill Clinton's very own.
Thank you, Tim. I rode on part of that bus trip from Monticello to Washington, D.C. with Bill Clinton, and we did talk about the challenges of writing a memorable inaugural speech, and it is the moment on this day that sets the tone for the first 100 days or so of the administration. A lot of people will be judging the failure or success of this day based on what he has to say here. He said that he had read all of the inaugural speeches as he prepared for this one.
Even Harrison's?
Even Harrison's, which ran for 2 hours. He did it in a driving rainstorm and then died a month later. That's a cautionary tale.
You and I were talking a little bit earlier about the expectations game for this speech and how difficult it is going to be for Bill Clinton. And in one sense, we're a little bit surprised, too, because the schedule calls for Clinton to give his inaugural address and then that to be followed by the speech on Pulse of Morning by the poem by Maya Angelou, and then the invocation, or the benediction rather, by Billy Graham. One would have thought it would have gone the other way, but that's
Billy Graham is the most is the preacher to the presidents. He spent last night at the White House.
This is 7th.
He was chosen today by Bill Clinton to appear here. He is a Baptist, of course. A lot of well-known American evangelists and preachers have come and gone, but Billy Graham has endured, and he will have a place in these inaugural ceremonies. We are looking now again at the White House as they prepare to leave there. They're beginning to run about 15 minutes behind schedule. They were due to be in the motorcade at 10:45 Eastern Time this morning. It's now coming up on 11, according to the official tentative schedule, as they describe it. Clinton and Gore's parents were to be arriving at the platform door. Well, all that has obviously been delayed.
Yeah, the moment they shoot for actually is noon, but there is nothing in the Constitution, frankly, that says it has to be done at noon. That is the objective.
Tipper Gore and Marilyn Quayle. Vice President Dan Quayle on the right and his successor Al Gore on the left. They served in the United States Senate. Senator Stevens behind him. Congressman Bob Michael, who is the Republican leader of the House, immediately coming out. Richard Gephardt, who is the majority leader in the House of Representatives. Barbara Bush and Hillary Clinton, arm in arm. The President of the United States and his successor, Bill Clinton. Speaker Foley from the House behind him.
Along with Senator Wendell Ford of the inaugural committee, the four of them will be riding over together in the first automobile. There is actually a very short motorcade, only 5 automobiles involved. The second will be the outgoing First Lady and the incoming. They'll be riding with Senator Mitchell and Representative Bob Michael.
George Bush, Bill Clinton, Foley, and Ford in that car. They'll have something to say to each other. There are 4 pals. I mean, they've been around a while. Okay, this is the route that they'll be following now. It's about 1.2 miles up Pennsylvania Avenue to the nation's capital. Pennsylvania Avenue has been restored in the last 20 years. When John F. Kennedy came down it, he said, can't we do something about Pennsylvania Avenue? It's been allowed to deteriorate to a pretty seedy condition. Inside the presidential limousine, George Bush, waving goodbye, departing the White House now. 8 years as Vice President of the United States, 4 years as President. He bids farewell to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the most prestigious address in the world.
Tom, as you noted, this ride will probably be enjoyable for both Bush and Clinton as they go on over. 'Twas not ever thus, as history has noted several times. FDR on the way to his, waving gleefully, Hoover staring straight ahead, Eisenhower and Kennedy not speaking to each other. Strained times between Ford and Carter, but this one should be relatively cordial.
There's a new informality to these occasions. People tend to forget that John F. Kennedy, who was a very contemporary president, at least in my memory, arrived here in top hat. The last president to do that. A silk top hat.
Wasn't it?
I know you have a lot of those.
No doubt. Wasn't it Eisenhower that started the run on Homburgs?
He had
when
the
he was when he was
right.
inaugurated.
That's right. The top hat did not catch on, however.
No, it didn't.
And
quite
John
make
Kennedy, in fact, did not do a lot for the hat industry because he refused to wear one after that, almost everywhere. And hats went out of fashion in America, now replaced by baseball caps. NBC's Tom Pettit is down there on the motorcade route. Tom?
Tom, this is one of the most magnificent views of the Capitol and the whole inaugural process and the parade itself this afternoon. Security, as you might well imagine, is very serious. It is seen and it is not seen. There are at least 5,000 Capitol Hill police in uniform around Capitol Hill. There are military guards along the route that the motorcade will pass. There are sharpshooters on top of several of these buildings. There's what they call the counter-assault team, which is like commandos who are prepared in case anything really untoward should happen, and their job would be to rescue whoever needs rescuing. It's a very, very clear day, and the security people will have no difficulty at all seeing the motorcade, which we're looking at now. The motorcade itself is flanked by not only DC police, but also by Secret Service agents. And within the crowds, there are a number, we don't know exactly how many, of undercover police, both from the FBI and from the local District of Columbia and from the United States Secret Service.
Thank you, Tom Pettit, along the parade route this morning. And security, of course, is a primary consideration. It is the responsibility of the Secret Service, but they enlist a lot of people, the DC police and all the other law enforcement agencies they can get their hands on. Many of them are undercover here. I even saw today a Tennessee State Highway Patrol car that had been driven up here, I suppose to help with the Gores and the Tennessee delegation.
Considering the excitement of the week, the crowd seems rather restrained. I'm surprised. Let's see if Margaret Larson has a different take on that. She's also along the route of the motorcade. She's up at the Navy Memorial. Margaret, are our mics just not picking it up or somewhat restrained?
Brian, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. As you could probably hear in the background, there's a reggae band providing some of the pre-parade entertainment, so we're having a little bit of audio difficulty, but I can tell you that on this very clear day with the crowds lining the streets, up to 250,000 people expected later to see the inaugural parade, we are awaiting the motorcade to bring Mr. Clinton and Mr. Bush to the swearing-in ceremony. Ceremony, of course, that will end the first-term presidency of George Bush and begin the Clinton era. We see now the motorcade proceeding this way, led by motorcycle police officers. We await the rest of the procession.
All right, thank you very much, Margaret Larson. We'll tell you that what happens here is the motorcade arrives at the Capitol. The rest of the party will go directly to the platform, but the principals, that is the Bush family, the Clinton family, and the Gore family, will be taken to a holding room, and then they'll be coming out onto that magnificent platform with this spectacular view of Washington, and we'll be back with more right after the station break.
NBC News coverage of the Clinton inaugural will continue.